The calculus teacher pointed to the janitor as a joke in front of the class. But when the man quietly walked up to the board and solved the problem better than anyone expected, it didn't just silence the room, it changed the way the entire school saw him. It was fourth period on a Thursday at Eisenberg High in Elkhart, Indiana, the kind of day where students glance at the clock more than they do the board. Mr. Braddock, the school's calculus teacher, had a reputation: sharp-tongued, impatient, and always quick with sarcasm. He wasn't particularly liked, but he wasn't hated either. Just endured. The classroom felt dry. Equations filled the whiteboard. The air smelled faintly of eraser dust and worn-out sneakers. Phones were tucked under desks, some pretending to pay attention, others staring out the window. Then, something happened that would shift the atmosphere like a sudden wind. As Mr. Braddock scribbled another derivative on the board, a faint squeak echoed from the hallway. The janitor was nearby, mopping outside the classroom with his usual slow, steady rhythm. Braddock paused mid-sentence, glanced at the door, and cracked a half-smile. Without warning, he turned to the class and pointed toward the hallway. "Well, look who's here. Mr. Dorsey. Tell me, you think you can solve this one?" He tapped the board with the back of his marker like he was issuing a challenge on a game show. Laughter broke out. Not roaring, but the kind that makes you shift in your seat because you're not sure if it's okay. Mr. Braddock smirked again. "Come on, Lamar. You always look like you've got something on your mind." Lamar Dorsey, the 52-year-old janitor, stood in the hallway with his mop in hand. He wore the same forest green uniform he always did, clean but faded, with L. Dorsey stitched over his chest pocket. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. He just looked into the room. Then slowly he stepped in. The mop leaned against the wall. A few students sat up straighter. Some thought he was about to say something smart back and leave. Maybe he'd crack a joke or just walk away. But he didn't. Instead, Lamar walked to the front of the room. "You mind?" he asked calmly, gesturing to the board. Braddock raised his brows. "Be my guest." A few phones slid quietly out from backpacks. One girl whispered, "Is he serious?" But nobody stopped Lamar. He picked up the marker, looked at the equation, and paused, not out of hesitation, more like he was thinking. Deeply. Like someone reading a familiar map. He squinted just slightly, then began to write. No showmanship. No flair. Just deliberate strokes, one line after another. The room fell into an eerie stillness. The only sounds were the marker on the whiteboard and a chair creaking as someone leaned forward. Mr. Braddock crossed his arms, watching closely. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Lamar broke down the steps out loud, his voice low and patient. "See, this here's a chain rule problem, but the trick is recognizing the inner function first. Once you isolate that, it becomes a lot cleaner." He moved like he'd done this before, not just the problem, but the teaching. His tone wasn't showy or smug. He explained things simply, clearly, like he'd spent more time teaching than mopping. When he finished, he capped the marker and stepped back. The board was filled with precise, well-organized work. He turned to Braddock, then to the class. "That's one way to do it," he said, and for a moment, no one moved. A junior in the back whispered, "He got it right." Mr. Braddock didn't say a word, not immediately. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. The silence grew louder than any joke he could have made. Lamar nodded politely and walked back to the door, picked up his mop. No applause, no boast, just that quiet confidence. Like he hadn't just turned the room upside down. But as Lamar reached for the chalk, nobody expected what would come next. Nobody moved. For a full 10 seconds, it felt like the class had been yanked out of a dream and dropped into something real. The kind of moment that doesn't belong in a high school classroom. Lamar Dorsey, Mr. Dorsey, as they'd always called him in passing, was halfway out the door when someone said it out loud. Wait, he just did that? In his head? It was Wes Hanley, a senior in the front row who usually didn't talk unless grades were involved. He wasn't joking. His eyes were wide. He looked at the board again, like the answer might have changed while he blinked. Braddock finally spoke. His voice was flat, almost irritated. Well, he got the right answer. But his tone didn't carry the usual sarcasm. Something else had slipped in. Something closer to confusion. Or worse, discomfort. Lamar glanced back. "I spent a lot of time with numbers a long time ago," he said, then gave a small shrug. "They never left." A few students laughed. Not at him this time, but because the tension was cracking. Lamar didn't wait for a response. He left, mop in hand, shoes squeaking softly down the hallway. Like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just solved a college-level problem in under 3 minutes without so much as a calculator. That's when the phones came out. Someone had filmed the whole thing. Carly Benson, Junior, 3rd row. And she was already editing the clip before the bell even rang. In the hallway between periods, it was all anyone could talk about. "Did you see Mr. Dorsey?" Braddock's face. Man looked like someone unplugged him. "Where'd he learn that stuff? I thought he just cleaned floors." By lunch, the video had made it onto TikTok, then Instagram. It wasn't polished, just a shaky angle of Lamar's hands moving across the board while a voice in the background whispered, "Yo, he's solving it." The caption read, "Our janitor just smoked the calculus teacher." Some laughed, some stared, but the buzz kept growing. In the teacher's lounge, things weren't much quieter. "You're telling me he did a full derivative chain problem in his head?" asked Ms. Lin, the physics teacher. She was mid-bite into her sandwich but had stopped chewing. "He did," muttered Mr. Crane, the English teacher. "Didn't use notes. Didn't even pause. It was like muscle memory." Braddock was at the corner table, pretending to grade papers. He didn't say anything. But Principal Everett did. "He's been here 6 years. No one ever mentioned he had an academic background?" People shook their heads. Nobody really knew much about Lamar. He came in early, left late. Floors were always clean. Light bulbs never burned out more than a day. The man worked in silence. But now he wasn't just the man behind the mop. Back in the hallway, a group of students waited outside the janitor's closet. Not to complain about a spill or ask for a broom. They just wanted to talk to him. One kid, 12 years old, clutching his geometry book, asked, "Do you tutor, Mr. Dorsey?" Lamar blinked. "I haven't in a long time." "You should," the kid said. That was cool. Lamar chuckled, but it didn't feel dismissive, just surprised. In 3rd period the next day, Braddock's mood was different. He didn't crack jokes. He didn't call on anyone randomly. He taught with his eyes fixed on the board, his voice more restrained than usual. Nobody said it outright, but everyone noticed. After class, Wes walked up to him. "Mr. Braddock, that thing with Mr. Dorsey yesterday, he used the same method you showed us last week. The chain rule, right?" Braddock nodded once. "Correct. Only, he explained it better." Braddock didn't answer. But what truly shocked them wasn't the solution. It was what Lamar said afterward. Lamar Dorsey hadn't planned on making a scene. He never liked being the center of attention, not since he was young. So when students started waiting by the maintenance closet just to talk, or when teachers gave him long looks in the hallways, he felt off balance. He kept his head down and went about his usual routine, refilling paper towels, fixing a leaky faucet in the boys' locker room, wiping down cafeteria tables. But he could feel it. The change. A shift in how people looked at him, like they were trying to fit him into a new picture they hadn't known existed. It wasn't just curiosity. It was confusion. Respect. Regret, maybe, and it made him uneasy. That afternoon, Principal Everett asked him to stop by the front office. He walked in still wearing his gloves, uniform a little damp from cleaning under the cafeteria sinks. He removed his cap as a sign of respect. Everett leaned forward in his chair, hands clasped. "Lamar, can I ask you something? Do you have a background in education or engineering?" Lamar hesitated. He looked down for a second, like dusting off an old part of himself he hadn't visited in years. "I went to Purdue," he said quietly. "Mechanical engineering. Full ride." The principal leaned back, eyebrows raised. "You serious?" "Was," Lamar said. "Had plans. Things got complicated, and for the first time in a long while, he told the story. He'd grown up in Gary, Indiana. Smart kid. Always loved how things worked. Motors, pulleys, anything he could take apart and put back together. His mother, Estelle, raised him and his two sisters on her own. She worked overtime at a textile plant and still found time to read to them every night. She believed in education like it was the only way out. Books first, always, she used to say. The world will try to shut the door, but if you bring your own key, they can't stop you. Lamar earned that key. Valedictorian, state science fair winner. And then that scholarship to Purdue. Freshman year, he was already tutoring classmates. Professors saw his name on the attendance sheet and paid attention. But sophomore year, he got a call that changed everything. His mother had collapsed at work. Doctors said it was late-stage cancer. By the time Lamar got to the hospital, she could barely stay awake. "I can take care of it," she whispered. "Don't come home." He didn't listen. He took a semester off, then another. He picked up jobs, warehouse work, night shifts at a grocery store, anything to pay bills. Classes faded into the background. So did the dream. By the time his mother passed, things were scattered. He had no home to return to, no money to finish his degree, and no guidance counselor calling to ask why he hadn't come back. "I kept thinking I'd get back to school," Lamar told Everett. But one thing turned into another. Life doesn't wait for you. The principal sat in silence. The story was heavy, not dramatic, just real. The kind of life you never hear unless you ask. Back at home, Lamar kept his transcripts in a box under his bed, along with a weathered Purdue sweatshirt, an old calculator, and a photo of him and his mom at orientation day. He never touched it, but never threw it away. Now, all of it was being dragged into the light again. That evening, he sat on the back steps of his small apartment complex. The sky was dim, the kind of quiet where the only sound was the hum of far-off traffic. He sipped tea from a metal thermos and stared ahead. He hadn't thought about calculus in years, not since that last tutoring gig he picked up before dropping out. And now, here it was again, like an old friend knocking on his door. But one decision would derail everything he had worked so hard for. Back in college, Lamar had made a promise to himself. Take a short break, get his family back on track, then finish strong. But life didn't bend to plans, especially not the kind built on hope alone. After his mother passed, Lamar returned to Gary, trying to piece things together. His sisters were still in high school, barely getting by. Bills stacked up on the counter. The landlord wanted rent, and no one from Purdue called to ask where he'd gone. He took whatever jobs he could get. Stockroom loader, janitor at a strip mall, overnight security at a shipping yard, anything that paid enough to keep the lights on. School drifted further and further into the rear view. At first, he'd call the university now and then, ask about reapplying, transferring credits. They'd send forms. He'd fill them out, but he never mailed them. Something always got in the way. Then came the breaking point. It was late November. A man named Frank Booker, who owned a flooring company in South Bend, had offered Lamar steady work. "You're sharp," he said. "Don't waste your time pushing brooms. I'll train you myself." Lamar had hope again. A real shot. But the day before he was supposed to start, his youngest sister Alana was caught in a fight at school. A stupid argument that escalated. She'd broken someone's nose. They threatened to expel her. Lamar had to be there. No one else would show up for her. So he missed his first day at the flooring job. Frank gave the spot to someone else. And that was it. A door that could have opened slammed shut. He stopped chasing dreams after that. Started chasing stability. Years blurred together, town to town, job to job. He never had a record, never got into trouble. Just survived. Quietly. By the time he arrived in Elkhart in his early 40s, he wasn't looking for a new beginning. Just a steady paycheck. The school district offered benefits. Summers were quiet. He took the janitor position without blinking. He liked it. in his own way. Predictable. Clean work. Students left him alone. Teachers smiled politely. He didn't expect friendship or connection. He didn't need it. He kept his head down, cleaned up messes, and disappeared before the last bell rang. But numbers never left him. Sometimes when he passed a math class, he'd glance at the board, see a formula and finish it in his head. It was like muscle memory, a part of him that stayed sharp even when everything else got buried under routine. He'd go home, make himself a quiet dinner, grilled fish, brown rice, maybe some carrots, and flip through an old engineering book he kept tucked behind the cereal boxes, just to see if he still had it. He always did. He just never had a reason to show it, until Mr. Braddock called him out that day. And now, things were shifting. Not just at school, but inside him. He thought about the kids who waited outside his supply closet with questions. Thought about Wes Hanley stopping by that morning with a folded piece of paper and saying, "Mr. Dorsey, I tried to solve that same problem. Can you check it for me?" And Lamar had. Gently, carefully. He explained where Wes had gone wrong without making him feel foolish. Wes smiled when he finally understood. Not just out of pride, but out of connection. That kind of thing stayed with you. But not everyone was thrilled. Braddock, for one, had gone quiet. Too quiet. Students noticed. Teachers noticed. Something about being shown up in front of your class by a man you never thought twice about. It rattled him. He didn't lash out, but his tone got shorter, his patience thinner. And when someone mentioned Lamar in the lounge, he changed the subject. He wasn't used to being outshined, especially not by someone who'd been invisible to him until now. But life had one more twist waiting, and this one brought him right back to math. The video didn't just make its way around Eisenberg High, it made its way out. It started small. A local student page reposted it with the caption, "When your janitor turns out to be smarter than your teacher." Then it landed on a regional education forum. By the weekend, it had crossed state lines. People online couldn't believe it. They weren't mocking Lamar. They were in awe. "Man broke it down cleaner than my college professor. Someone get this man a classroom and a chalkboard, not a mop." Proof you never know someone's story. By Monday morning, Lamar had no idea any of this was happening. He didn't follow social media. He still had a flip phone. When he arrived at work, the first thing he did was fix a jammed paper towel dispenser in the girls' bathroom, just like he always did on Mondays. But something felt different. Teachers paused their conversations when he walked past. Students nodded, not out of obligation, but with a strange kind of respect. A few even smiled like they were seeing him for the first time. "Hey, Mr. Dorsey," one girl called as he passed the library. "You're kind of famous now." Lamar chuckled softly. Don't believe everything you read. But when he turned the corner, Wes Hanley was waiting there with two other students. One had a calculus book in his hands, opened to a problem highlighted in pink. "Would you mind going through this with us?" Wes asked. Lamar looked around, confused. "You got a free period?" "We made time." And just like that, in the middle of a hallway lined with lockers and science fair posters, Lamar sat down on the floor with three teenagers and walked them through a multivariable equation. Step by step, line by line. Not talking at them, talking with them. It wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but something meaningful was happening. Down the hall, someone filmed it. No one told Lamar. He wouldn't have liked that. Back in the office, Principal Everett was on the phone with someone from the local school board. "Yes, that's correct. Lamar Dorsey. Been with us 6 years. No, he's not faculty. He's a custodian." He paused, listening. "Well, I wouldn't call it unorthodox. I'd call it overlooked." Meanwhile, in the teacher's lounge, Braddock was reading an email forwarded by a parent, a link to the now viral video. No commentary, no subject line, just the link and the phrase, "Thought you'd want to see this." He closed the laptop without watching it. That afternoon, Everett called Lamar back in, offered him a seat. Lamar stayed standing. "I've got a request from the board," the principal said. "They want to know if you'd be interested in running an after-school tutoring program. Small group, voluntary, just a trial run." Lamar didn't answer right away. "You'd be paid, of course," Everett added. "It's not about replacing your current role, just adding to it. Sharing what you clearly still have." Lamar looked down at his hands. Calloused, clean, worn. "I haven't taught in a long time," he said. "You haven't stopped knowing," Everett replied. Lamar looked up. There was no pressure in the man's voice, just a simple invitation. "I'll think about it." That night, he pulled the old cardboard box out from under his bed. The one with the Purdue sweatshirt, the transcripts, the orientation photo. He hadn't touched it in years. He laid everything out on the table. The paper had yellowed a little, the edges curled, but the words were still there. That was the thing about knowledge. It didn't fade. It waited. He didn't need to go viral, didn't care about the views or the comments. But knowing he could still make a difference, that tugged at something. But while some were amazed, others weren't so thrilled by his rising attention. The more attention Lamar received, the more the school began to shift. It started with the kids. They were the first to change. The ones who used to pass him in the hall without a second glance now stopped to say good morning. A few even asked for help on homework between classes. By the end of the second week, a small circle of students had unofficially formed what they called Dorsey sessions. They'd meet in the library after school, notebooks open, heads bent, listening as Lamar explained concepts with clarity no one expected, but everyone respected. Then came the teachers. Most were supportive. Ms. Lin from physics was the first to swing by the library and watch him work with the students. "You've got a gift," she said softly. "And I don't mean just with numbers." But not everyone was thrilled. Mr. Braddock hadn't said a word about Lamar since the day it all happened. In the teacher's lounge, he acted as if nothing had changed. But the bitterness was clear in his silences. He spoke in clipped sentences. He never looked Lamar in the eye. He never mentioned calculus. When a parent-teacher meeting brought up Lamar's growing influence with the students, Braddock said, "It's good they're interested in math. Let's just make sure we don't blur the line between instruction and inspiration." It sounded polite on the surface, but the tone behind it? Everyone heard it. The principal didn't let it slide. He brought Braddock into his office one morning and laid it out plainly. "I know it stung," Everett said, "but Lamar didn't embarrass you. He inspired them." Braddock shifted in his seat. "He's not qualified. He's educated, more than we realized. And more importantly, he's reaching kids in a way none of us have." Braddock opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say. Not really. Meanwhile, Lamar kept to his routine. He didn't ask for a title, didn't want special treatment. But when the principal offered him a modest stipend to keep the tutoring sessions going, he accepted. Not for the money, but because it felt right. He started carrying a small binder with him. Inside were pages of problems, blank worksheets, notes he'd written by hand. During breaks, he'd sit in the back corner of the cafeteria and scribble down formulas from memory, occasionally nodding at a passing student who'd call out, "Hey, Mr. D!" One afternoon, Carly, the student who filmed the original clip, stopped him by the vending machines. "Did you ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Lamar took a second before answering. "I wanted to build things. Teach later, maybe, but life had different ideas." "Well," she said, handing him a fresh mechanical pencil, "I think you're doing both now." He smiled. "Thank you." But behind all this good, there was tension brewing. Some parents had started calling the school. Most were supportive, but one anonymous complaint hit the board. "Is it appropriate for a janitor to tutor students in a school setting? Is he certified? Has he been background checked for instruction?" Everett handled it swiftly. "He's an employee of the district. He's done nothing wrong. And if concern was truly the motive, they'd have spoken with me directly." He never told Lamar about the complaint. Still, Lamar could feel something in the air. Not resentment, but resistance. Like some folks didn't know how to place him now that he didn't fit neatly into the background. Then one afternoon, Braddock did something no one expected. He walked into the library during one of Lamar's tutoring sessions. Quietly, watched from a distance as Lamar explained integrals to a group of 4 students. After about 10 minutes, he stepped forward. "You mind if I sit in?" Braddock asked. Lamar looked up. His expression didn't change. He nodded toward the chair. "Long as you don't mind learning something." The students laughed, just enough to lighten the moment. Braddock smirked. For once, it wasn't mean. They sat together that day. Said little, but it was a start. But Lamar wasn't interested in titles. He had something else in mind. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. For Lamar Dorsey, standing at the whiteboard in the library with students gathered around, it was never about redemption or revenge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to be remembered. He was just showing up for them, the kids, the ones who reminded him of the boy he used to be. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, that corner of the library filled with chatter, questions, scribbled notes, and wide eyes as Lamar walked students through math problems they once feared. Not because he had all the answers, but because he made them believe they could find those answers themselves. That's what stuck. There was Isaiah, the freshman who nearly failed algebra last semester, now solving quadratic equations without looking panicked. And Tasha, who used to hate math, now leading mini-sessions on weekends for her cousins using Lamar's notes. He never stood at the front like a traditional teacher. He sat beside them, talked with them, asked them questions before answering theirs, and gradually more teachers started dropping by. Not to supervise, just to learn how he was doing it. Ms. Lynn asked if she could adopt some of his explanations for her class. Coach Rivera asked if Lamar would help set up a summer prep group for incoming freshmen. Even Braddock, hesitant, prideful Braddock, stopped by regularly. Not every day, but often enough. He'd quietly offer an extra problem or two and eventually began offering words of encouragement to the kids. The edge in his voice had dulled. Something in him had softened. One day during a tutoring session, Braddock lingered after the students left. "You know," he said, looking at the board, "I used to think this job made me important. That teaching gave me power." Lamar didn't interrupt. "But you've reminded me what it's really about. Showing up. Making it count." Lamar just nodded. "We all lose our way sometimes." He didn't hold grudges. He didn't need to. Principal Everett called him in again a month later. There was a proposal on the table to formalize his sessions into an elective class next semester. Not for credit, but enrichment. A bridge between students and their own confidence. "We'll have to jump through some hoops," Everett warned. "But if you're willing," Lamar shook his head gently. "I appreciate it," he said, "but I don't need the title. I'd rather keep it simple. Let the kids come because they want to, not because it's on a schedule." Everett nodded. "Then we'll support you however we can." Word spread beyond the school district. A local reporter stopped by to interview him. Lamar kept it short. No dramatic story, no self-promotion. "I'm just showing them what they already have inside," he said. "Sometimes it takes a little time to see it." In the spring, Eisenberg High hosted its annual student showcase. There were science projects, art displays, choir performances, and in one corner of the gym, a booth titled Dorsey's Table displayed student-written reflections on math, life, and confidence. Dozens of students had written about how Lamar helped them see more in themselves, not because he gave them answers, but because he listened and believed. By the end of the night, people weren't asking, "Is he the janitor?" anymore. They were saying, "That's Mr. Dorsey." He didn't wear a suit. He didn't give a speech. He stood by the table, smiled, and thanked the students who came by. Later that evening, back at his apartment, he pulled out the old Purdue sweatshirt from the box under his bed. He didn't put it on. He folded it neatly, placed it in a new storage bin, and added a folder filled with student thank you notes beside it. Legacy, he realized, isn't about titles. It's about what you leave behind in others. He didn't need to finish school to teach. He didn't need a degree to lead. He just needed to show up every day and care. And that's exactly what he planned to keep doing. Thanks for listening to Lamar's story. If it moved you, if it reminded you of someone you've overlooked or someone who believed in you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. Because sometimes the biggest minds are hiding in the quietest places.